Hello, my friend. Welcome to another episode with your favorite sister from another mister. Of all the podcasts you could be listening to, I really am thankful that you chose to tune in with your girl, Rodica. You know, I truly hope the content I'm sharing with you is blessing your life. My goal with this podcast really is just to provide you with great content that's going to help you increase your hope, strengthen your faith, and boost your psychological well-being. Now, in this particular episode, I sat down with my friend and clinical psychologist, Tracy Dickens, who agreed to share her clinical and spiritual perspective on how we can best process and move through our feelings of shame so that those feelings don't paralyze us, they don't isolate us, and stop us from connecting with God, from connecting with ourselves, and connecting with others in fulfilling ways. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into this thing. What is going on, everyone? Super excited to have you joining me for today's episode. This topic that I'm going to share about today and the guest that I have is very important to me because it is really a silent epidemic and it's affecting a lot of people and robbing them of their potential, robbing them of their psychological well-being and their purpose in life. And so I just thought it would be good to come on and have a conversation. And what am I talking about? What is this silent epidemic I'm talking about? It is shame. And we know that shame is associated, the research shows, with depression, with grief, with anxiety, with eating disorders, with addiction, and even violence. And so today I asked my friend and my sister, who is an amazing woman of God, but also a clinical psychologist, Dr. Tracy, to join us today to have this conversation about shame and shame resilience and ultimately to get God's perspective on this so that we can be free and walk into all that God has created us to be, right? And walk in freedom. And so, Dr. Tracy, thank you so much for being here again, girl.
Thank you. It's great to be back to talk to everybody.
So excited to have you again here in the seat with me at the table, at the round table. So for those of you who don't know, I'm a big reader. If you follow me on social media, follow me online or anything like that, you know that I love to read. Books are my friends. That's what I say.
Mine too.
And I am a big Dr. Brene Brown fan, if you don't already know. And I have been reading one of her books called I Thought It Was Just Me, But It Isn't. Making the journey from what will people think to I am enough. And in the book, she talks a lot about shame. And so to kind of give a backdrop to our conversation today, I want to just kind of jump off and start with her definition of shame and how she defines that. And then I want to turn it over to Dr. Tracy to really talk to us, give us her thoughts about shame and the difference between shame and guilt, and then just kind of get into what does it mean to be shame resilient, okay? So I hope that sounds good. So Brene defines shame as the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing we are flawed and therefore unworthy of acceptance and belonging. And I like how she said in the book that it's the painful and distressing feeling I feel when I see myself through the eyes of someone who is critical, who is judgmental, demeaning, or disapproving of some part of who I am. And it creates these feelings of fear, of blame, of powerlessness, of psychological disconnection, and it causes us to do almost anything. I thought that was something. Mm-hmm. In a desperate attempt to escape the feelings of disconnection and powerlessness. And, she went on to kind of say that shame causes us to act out in ways that are inconsistent with who we want to be. Shame is I am bad, and guilt is I did something bad or wrong. And so it's about my identity versus my behavior.
Exactly.
Okay. So when we look at the origin of this, right, because we know this is a faith-based podcast, and so we talk about things from the God's word and his perspective on this. And so we know the scriptures are full of stories about shame, people who have had shaming experiences, if you will. And we go all the way to the first book of Genesis. And I would love to hear your perspective on shame when we look at the first humans that were ever created. So
yes. Because I think anytime you're discussing a topic with anything, with anger, shame, happiness, joy, it's always good to go back to when's the first time you even see that
yes.
In the Bible, so you can really understand at the roots, what was the purpose? What was the intention? What did God have in mind? And so when we go back to that original story, which so many of us are so familiar with, but I really want to zoom in on a few things that I think sometimes gets overlooked to make sure everyone's on the same page about why shame is so significant and why it's even important for us to talk about. Absolutely. And why it is such an epidemic today and it's causing so many problems. Mm-hmm. In the first emotion he talks about after creating man and woman is shame. And if you're familiar with how kind of theology works, God is in the details. And if he presents something, and the order in which he presents something, it means something. Yeah. And that is like a big highlight because he says Adam and his wife were both naked and they felt no shame. They're vulnerable. When you think about being naked, you're vulnerable. And when you look at like the original context, what it's really capturing is this idea of being emotionally vulnerable and just being authentic and truly who they were with each other. And when we're in that place, we don't have shame, which is a good thing. And if you keep reading, you see right after he sets it up where we are authentic and vulnerable and we're just comfortable with each other and there's no shame, the serpent just makes its way onto the scene and things quickly change. And when the serpent shows up, he gives his statements about what God said, and I'll give you what he said. He asked the woman, did God really say you must not eat from the tree of the garden? And so I'm wondering, and I don't know, I'm just kind of thinking, trying to understand Eve's perspective. If maybe it's just thinking, you know, I kind of know me, and there's this tree, and I've been told not to mess with it. And I want to make the expectation even more stringent so I don't mess up. I don't even want to think about the tree. I don't even want to get near the tree. I don't want to touch the tree because I don't want to mess up. And when we do that and we mess up, now there's all of this guilt and shame we have towards ourselves because I know better. I should have done better. I did everything I could and I still messed up. And so, I mean, from the beginning, you see that shame really has its initial seedlings in expectations. You know, either somebody else placing their expectations on you or me, or sometimes the stories we tell ourselves when we've heard messages and we've kind of created stories and these ideas and these adaptations about how to function. And we set these expectations beyond what we've even been told. And now we've created a situation where it's even harder to measure up. And it was never designed that way. God never wanted it to be such a stressor that Eve couldn't even touch the tree. Right? She can touch it. Right? There's nothing wrong with touching it. I just don't want you to eat from it. Yeah. And you can eat the fruit. He didn't say you can't have any fruit. You can eat the fruit. Yeah. Just don't have that particular fruit. Yeah. And so shame initially gets its roots in those expectations. And it's a relational thing. I mean, it's a relational, and I think that's very much in the details. Adam and Eve together, they were naked and authentic. And here's this thing that comes in and really sets kind of this expectation up. And when you go on and the devil kind of asks more questions and Eve starts doubting and the devil's like, really this what God said is really about, him not wanting you to be wise like him. And so now you're questioning your relationship with God. And now it's like, oh. And so now you see this relational piece and why shame is so challenging, because when we're vulnerable and authentic with each other, shame can't get in, right? It's right there. And the minute we start chasing after other people's expectations or our own expectations and aren't based on the original expectation from the designer, then that's when we just lose our identity. We lose who we are. We start doubting in God's goodness. We start doubting in our own goodness. And that was never how it was intended to be.
Brene, in her research, she talks about these 12 areas where women struggle the most with their feelings of shame. And so I'm going to just share those really quick with the listeners. So as I said, number one is appearance and body image, right? And so we see in scripture, we have some examples of that. Second area is in motherhood. Third is when it comes to family. Fourth, when it comes to our parenting. 5, money and work. 6, our mental and physical health. 7 is issues related to sexuality or sex. 8 would be aging. 9, religion. 10, being stereotyped and labeled. And we see a lot of that in our culture. 11 is speaking out and really sharing that story. And 12 is surviving trauma. So these are the 12 areas that her research identified as areas where women in particular struggle the most. And so when I throw it back to you, Dr. Tracy, I want to just for you to give some more context as to, you know, what are some of the experiences that trigger shame in us? I mean, I can totally give an example. We were talking a little bit before we started recording of a practical example, and I'll just share one really quick, and then I guess since I'm here, and then feel free to take it where you want to take it, girl. But I was sharing with Dr. Tracy before we started recording, you know, how I had this experience as a young person growing up. I mean, I'm 5'7" as a woman, which used to be above average and might be a little bit more, still maybe a tad above average.
Yeah, a tad.
You know, I'm not too short, I'm not too tall, but at the end of the day, but as I was growing up, I had really big feet. I mean, I still do. That didn't change. But growing up, when it came to my body image, I had a lot of shame around my foot size. So for all of you listeners who were wondering, oh, her feet can't be that big. Well, I wear a size 11. But growing up as a teenager, I can remember going to like Foot Locker. You know, I'm a girl from the hood. I got these daggone big feet. Back in the day, in the 80s, they didn't really have a nice selection of size 11 shoes, right? I'm just going to be honest. Thank God for all the new now shoe distributors that are making lots of size 11s. Shout out to y'all. But growing up, it was very hard. And I felt a lot of shame about even asking a shoe clerk, I need a size 11. You know?
Yeah.
We don't have a size 11 in the store. We only had 3. And it was like, good Lord. Right. It's like, geez, you put me on blast, you know, and let alone. So again, a girl from the hood, you go to Foot Locker and it's all these brothers there, you know what I'm saying? And it's like, oh, and I would find myself shrinking back and not even telling them my size. I would just leave and tell myself I'm going to find my shoes online. Right. And so there was a lot of shame around that because publicly and with your peers, I guess, in school and in middle school and high school, I was picked on for the size of my feet and I actually was very clumsy because of my feet. So I did not want you to see my feet. And so I remember, what did that feeling of shame cause me to do? It caused me to try to find shoes, right, online, away from the public eye. Right, just like the woman at the well, she wanted to go to the well and get what she needed when the least amount of people are around. So that's kind of was my thought: go where people can't really see me. Yep. And so I would order them online, or I would have someone else ask for that size for me and kind of try them on, and you know, away from people's eyes. And I knew, and it's so weird, but I would never wear sandals or open-toe shoes because in my mind, I perceived that if I wore sandals, that would draw attention to my feet. And I don't want to draw attention to my feet because I felt shame around my foot size. So I am happy to say, for all of you listeners, I have overcome the shame of my feet, and I proudly wear my sandals and my toes.
Yes.
But,
and fabulous.
Yeah, oh, thank you. But it really took my husband to help me embrace that part of who I am and not be ashamed. And I think when it comes to our body image, we can all pick different parts, right? Our breast size, you know, our waist size, are we an hourglass? Are we square figured? Are we pear shaped? You know, and all these different things that cultural messages have told us you do not want to be that.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
You know, I could go on and talk about hair, you know, and I'll share that and then want you to jump in, Dr. Tracy. But, you know, I was sharing with Dr. Tracy as well that for a minority or a mixed girl, if you will, the culture that I was in is that straight hair was in, right? So relaxers were really big back then. I did not get a relaxer in my hair, but what was celebrated as beautiful in the culture was straight hair, right? Barbie is the standard of beauty. And let me tell you, my skin color alone disqualified me from that. Oh, and you got curly hair, disqualified, you know. But so I remember in the circles of school, I would never let my hair be curly. I would always straighten my hair. You will not, if I washed my hair one day, that same day I was straightening it, you know, as a young person, you know, and that went all the way even into my early 30s. That was just like, you were not going to see my curly hair because that was not acceptable. It wasn't celebrated. It wasn't the standard of beauty for a woman of color. And I remember even one time going, it was my wedding day. I was 20 years old, and my mom, who is white, took me downtown Pittsburgh to a very celebrated hair salon. And I won't say their name, y'all. I'm not. If you want to know, hit me up. I don't even know if they still exist. But my mama took me down there to this black hair salon, and the girl, she was a black girl. She was washing my hair, and she said in a very negative way, "You need to get a relaxer in this mess. This is, first of all, it is too much hair."
That's crazy.
Can you believe that?
I mean, I can believe it, but it's crazy.
Yeah, because I'm like, wait, you supposed to be my sister. You know what I'm saying? You over here hating on my hair. And that caused me to feel shame. And that reinforced that message that I wasn't pretty enough because my hair was not straight, or I did not choose to have a relaxer in my hair. And so it further reinforced that message. And so I want to throw it to you, Dr. Tracy, just, are there some other experiences that maybe, in your work as a professional or even personally, however you want to, whatever angle you want to take, that trigger, what are some other experiences that trigger shame in us?
So, it was funny when you were talking about your shoes. I was like, I had something, my feet, because I'm 5'2", remember?
Yeah.
I'm 5'2". Now I don't think my feet are big. They're average. But when you're in the 4th grade.
Yes.
And you're the tallest, and you're developing, and your mom wears a cute little petite size 7 shoe, and all the women in the family wear 6.5 or 7, and you fall on the trampoline, sprain your ankle. We're not sure what's going on, but it looks gruesome. Takes you to the pediatrician. Let's see if your ankle's broken.
Oh.
Does the x-ray, does it again, because oh my goodness, it might be broken. Let's make sure. Oh, no, it's not broken. Her feet are just still growing, and that's what we see. And Mom's like, what do you mean her feet are still growing? She wears a size 8. How much bigger are they getting? I mean, they're huge already. She's a kid. Like, what do you mean her feet are going to continue to grow? But in a family where everyone has size 7 and smaller.
Right. You've already exceeded the limit to foot size. Yeah.
Right. And I'm in elementary school, so it's like, oh, no.
That's hard. Yeah.
And so I was like, yeah, I can identify with that. Yep. But I mean, I wear sandals.
Yeah.
But it is hard because you do get those messages pretty early on, and it does stick with you, and you have to, push past them. And, and when it comes up, when you are faced with those situations, from those past expectations, even if you've worked through them, and somebody and somebody's like, oh, like now, like I'll be at work and people are like, what size shoe do you wear? And my initial gut response is kind of like, right. It kind of like tightens up, and I'm like, do I say?
That's real.
Even though I know 8.5, that's average. And I've pushed past that, but that default, it's still there, that reaction of, what do you mean her feet are still growing? What are you saying right now? How big are her feet gonna get? Yeah. I mean, it's still there. Yeah. And I get that reaction, and then it's like, okay. My feet are fine. And then I'm like, oh, an 8.5. People are like, really? 8.5? They look smaller than that. And I'm like, really?
Right. That's what people try to say to me. I'm like, okay. And I used to wear like big wedge shoes because that when you have shoes with a wedge, it can give the appearance that your feet are smaller. But I had to stop doing it because that was hurting my back. So, goodbye wedges. And I have embraced my feet. These are the feet Jesus gave me. This is the hair that he gave me. But, I was even thinking through when it comes to, and maybe I'm staying stuck on appearance because I could totally get into motherhood. I can totally get into family and parenting and work and money and physical health and all of those other things. But I'm a mixed girl, right? So dad is black, mom is white. And growing up, there was even a lot of, as a biracial girl and family in the community, there weren't a lot of biracial kids that we knew of at the time, right? So names like half-breed, zebra, yellow girl, high yellow, made me take a step back and say, okay, what is wrong with me, right? That's that shame message. There's something wrong with me because I'm mixed. I remember even people telling my parents that your kids are going to have problems. They're going to be confused because they're 2 races. That people had these assumptions, right? And so that's getting into a whole nother thing. But growing up, so you don't feel like you quite fit in. I'm not black. I'm not white. I'm both, but I look like a light-skinned black woman, right? So, all of these different things about being stereotyped and labeled as yellow girl, zebra, all of those kind of things. Even religion, aging, right? There's shame around aging. So all of the makeup is kind of helping those of us who
younger.
Yes.
And we don't want to age. It's like, we're going to age. I know my mom, like, every time she sees me, because I have had gray hair since I was 16, and now it's definitively gray hair. I have a lovely skunk stripe in the front, and I think it's fine. And I get compliments on my hair. My mom's like, you really need to color your hair. I don't understand why you're not coloring your hair.
Yeah.
My mom's been coloring her hair forever.
Wow.
I mean, but she grew up in a generation where that's what you did, right? I mean, how many, if you go to church, you see older women, the jet black hair, and you're like, that's not real. You're 80. Stop it.
Right. But again, it goes back to that message.
It goes to that message of, this is how you're supposed to look. Right. Like, it's this expectation that in order to be attractive or beautiful or to be desirable, this is how it has to be. And it's like, no, that's not that. Where does it say in the Bible that I have to use Clairol on my hair when I'm 80 to be accepted? Listen, it didn't say that anywhere.
I ain't gonna lie. Maybe I got some shame around this too. Look, as we're talking about it, when I get some of these gray hairs on my crown, I'm not gonna lie, I do pluck them out. I do. I'm like, I don't want to see these gray hairs because it means I'm getting old. And not that I actually consciously tell myself I'm not beautiful because of them, but you're right. It is that message, these unwanted identities. That's what Brene talks about in her book. She talks about how if we look at our unwanted identities, right? No one wants to be labeled as being an unkind mom, of being uptight, too ambitious, overly sensitive, ugly person, fat person, too skinny person, anorexic person. These are all these labels and identities that society can kind of throw on us. And so she mentions, that we need to uncover these sources. And she says, we need to ask ourselves some questions like, what do these perceptions mean to us? Why are they so unwanted? And where did the messages that fuel these identities come from? And I love how, I think she continued to go on to talk about us really addressing these unwanted identities and saying, okay, if I limited myself to what people say about me, right? How is that going to impact me? How do I work through that? And so I'm not doing a very good job of explaining that, but I just feel like, there are these, she talks about reality checking what society's expectations are that are driving these feelings of shame.
Right.
Do you want to say anything on that?
Yeah. And I think that's what I was, trying to capture when I was reading the context. It's like, God says this, and society will say ... And then sometimes I will tell myself, no, maybe society, nah, but then I'll still have a different expectation, different from God, different from society, but it's still not what God had in mind. And the sad part is, it just disconnects us from who we're designed to be. God doesn't care if your feet are size 11, if you got gray hair, or you don't cut the crust off your sandwiches to make these cute little perfect Pinterest sandwiches for your kids' lunch. He doesn't care. He's invested in your heart, right, and who you are, and that you are fulfilling the purpose that he designed you to fulfill. And as long as we're chasing after meeting all these expectations that aren't even healthy for us, or not, a lot of times they're not even attainable.
Yeah.
Right. And then we get so upset and we do all these behaviors to cover up and hide and isolate and push people away. So then we can't even heal from them because the very way that we heal from shame is to relate to people and be vulnerable and we step away from it. And it's like we just get further and further away from what God intended for us.
Agreed.
And it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, society tries to tell us, when we look at these 12 areas, right, of as being mothers and parenting and how we should parent, right? Who do we need to be as wives? We need to do it all. We need to work. We need to have a clean house. Our children need to be, prim and proper. We need to be women in the workforce that are awesome and wives that are awesome. We need to be sex goddesses in the bedroom. You got to do all these different things. Homemakers, breadwinners, do it all. Yeah. Right, the superwoman and have this cape. We got to be young. We got to be beautiful. We got to be sexy. We got to be skinny. We got to be sweet. We got to be silent and maybe savvy too. Or sometimes we shouldn't stand out or we should be perfect. We should be flawless. We should be kind and loving, in control at all times of all of our emotions, of those that we lead, those that we love, those that we work with. You know, all of these messages of who we are supposed to be.
And I'm like, okay, that's all. What did God say? Because that's exhausting. Like, I can't even. And I will say that sometimes people say, well, I'll tell you what God said. And for women, they'll take you to Proverbs 31. Now, I love me some Proverbs 31. Yeah. But a while back, because I listened to Proverbs 31 Ministry with Lisa Turkirsch and her fabulous team. And they had an amazing teaching about Proverbs 31 and what it means to be a virtuous woman. And they pointed out that the actual word virtuous in its initial intended meaning, it meant to be strong and helpful, like a supportive person. It wasn't implying that if you're virtuous,
an entrepreneur, businesswoman,
that you're like doing all these things.
I gotta be a seamstress. My own clothes.
It was not. It was never intended. But over time, we've seen virtuous as being like, you know, heroic and you're capable of doing all these things. And it was like, no. Its initial purpose was that you're just a support, that you're an encourager, that you're a helper, that you're that. And as words get changed and you know, it's used differently and perceptions and it's just taken on a very different thing. You know, kind of like with courage. And Brene Brown talks a lot about courage and how the original meaning of courage was to share what's on your heart and mind. And over time, it's become this word of heroicism and, you know, bravery. And it's like, no, it's, again, brings us back to this idea of being vulnerable. Because when we're vulnerable and when we're in that place with people, it sets us up for rejection. But that's where the healing is. That's when we learn, I'm not alone, right? That's when, I had a shoe thing too. I had a foot thing too. Oh my gosh, I had this too. And it's like, oh wow, it's not just me. I mean, somebody else has the same. Oh my goodness, all this time I've been telling myself, I'm the only one who looks at a donut and gains 5 pounds. You do too?
Right, absolutely.
And so, I mean, it's so freeing once you get over what society is telling you what you're supposed to be. And you go to your original maker.
That's right.
Go to the man who should know. He made me. And find out who he says I am. It's so liberating. It's hard to do.
It is.
Because every day
there's messages telling us you're not good enough. You're not pretty enough, smart enough, confident enough, savvy enough, you know, whatever it is. So we talked about this a little bit earlier, but, you know, Brene talks about these strategies of disconnection. So meaning there are defense mechanisms that are inside of us as humans and strategies that we use to manage our feelings of shame. And so she talks about we move away from, we move toward, or we move against others. And so I just wanted you to just kind of give us a little bit of idea of what that means when we move toward, against, or away from others. How does that look in our behavior?
So let's say, you know, with the example of, you know, my mom saying, oh, you need to be, you know, coloring your hair. What's wrong with your hair? And I'm like, ugh. So, you know, and moving away might be, oh, okay, I have to go see her. Oh, I don't know if I go see her, she's going to say something about my hair. So maybe I'll just put it off. And I won't see her as much, so I don't have to listen to her say as much about my hair. And instead of doing FaceTime, we'll just talk on the phone. I always make sure I'm busy, so FaceTime isn't even an option, so I shouldn't comment about my hair. You know, it's like avoiding. Basically, it's staying away, like isolating, withdrawing. I don't even want to see you, so I don't even have to hear it. I don't have to have that feeling that I get when I'm with you, that I'm trying to work through. It's like, don't have anything to do with it. Or it could be, okay, well, she says she doesn't like the gray hair, so I guess I'll color it when I go and visit her so I can show her that I'm trying, and maybe I'll just do a rinse so when I'm there, it looks better, and then I can come home and I can wash my hair a lot and get it out, right? So I'm pleasing her. I'm doing whatever the expectation is
seeking her
for
approval.
The moment to get the approval, and I can go on. Or it's kind of lashing out, you know, being just mean or hateful. It's like, I'm going to wear my hair however I want. It's not my problem that you have a problem with gray hair. That's not my deal. That sounds like you have a problem. And look at you. And don't you know that everybody knows that you color your hair? What's your problem? Which would absolutely probably get my mouth knocked out.
Right, right. Even as an adult. Correct.
You're like, what?
Yeah.
But that tends to be the reaction. Either we just avoid, we stay away, we don't answer phone calls, we don't answer text messages. Oh, you text me? I didn't get it when you did, but you're saying, oh, I know what you're talking about. Oh, I forgot we were supposed to be meeting. It's all these things that we'll do to try and sidestep or just try and be so saccharine sweet and just pleasant so they can't see the truth, right? That you're really hurting and that you're really hurt by what they're saying, or you're struggling with trying to be this perfect whatever, or just being mean. Because if I can get you now to doubt your own goodness, then we're not focused on mine now, right? Because now this is you, and you need to fix your own junk. Right?
And I love how Brene, she the language she uses for that moving against is using shame to fight shame. So I feel shame about this, so I'm going to put it back on you, and I'm going to cause you to feel shame about some part of you, right? And fighting back with that. So to get into these 4 strategies, right, or these 4 elements of shame resilience, I want to kind of get into each of those and talk a little bit about those. The first element is recognizing shame and understanding our triggers. And so I would love for you to just share a little bit about how can we recognize when we are in shame and recognize what our triggers are.
Yeah. Well, it can look different, for everybody. I think for most people, they'll talk about feeling like a heaviness, just feeling uncomfortable. I know for my clients, I can usually tell in session if we're talking about something where there's a lot of shame because they don't look at me. And that's a big one. And not looking at me. And some people, kind of their personality, like I tend to talk and not look at people, but it's not at not looking at you. It's a looking down, covering your face, just not wanting people to see you. And so, kind of recognizing, when I'm talking and I'm uncomfortable, am I suddenly looking away? Am I turning to the side? Am I even facing the person, or am I off angle from them? And how do I feel internally? Is my stomach feel like it's in knot? My hands, I know sometimes when I get really anxious or insecure, like I'll like my fingers will tingle, or I'll like be clenching because I'm like, part of me is wanting to say something back, but I'm like, no. I don't want to say anything. And so I don't know, there's like this tension internally that's like, that you're just unsettled. And a lot of people in some way, they have this kind of unsettled heaviness and kind of wanting to kind of shift their body position from the person that you're with.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Kind of like cut that connection off.
Kind of like
somehow.
a moving away from kind of physiologically. So you're saying there's these physiological signs of it that I know for me, my stomach hurts. Like my stomach just starts turning. I feel a lot of feelings, disappointment in my stomach. Like a lot of things are in my gut, and they say that your gut's like your second brain, I hear, is what they say. But that's kind of, so just really recognizing being, and that requires some emotional self-awareness, right? Because sometimes we don't always realize the physiological symptoms that are indicators of a particular feeling that's happening inside of us. So, but that is definitely a sign when you start feeling some kind of way.
Yeah, when you start feeling like your heart's racing, or you feel sweaty, your palms are cold or sticky, or you're tingly, your stomach feels like somebody's twisting it, or like, I don't feel it, but my friends tell me that I do it. Whenever I'm mad, my nostrils flare. And so even if I'm trying to keep my cool, they're like, I can tell you're mad because your nostrils are flaring.
Yeah. It's a telltale sign.
Thanks, Dad.
One, what I found was interesting when I was listening to Brene share some of the physiological symptoms of this. She said they're very much like trauma symptoms.
Yes.
And so the brain does not make the distinction, between this is trauma or this is an emotional trauma, I guess, if you were like I'm not saying that right. You can elaborate on that better. But I just found that these physiological symptoms that we have of being in shame are very much like trauma.
It is. Because, I keep saying, shame is a relational, it's an experience that happens in relationship when there's a disconnection. And so if I feel like I'm not measuring up, like I'm not enough, like I am flawed in some way, you just kind of think evolutionarily, if something's wrong with me, I'm not going to have people around me.
Yeah.
I'm going to be left. I'm going to be vulnerable.
And I won't survive.
I won't survive.
Yeah.
And so if there's a possibility that I'm going to be rejected, that's serious fight or flight territory.
Yeah.
Right. And my brain doesn't know the difference between physical pain and emotional pain because both leave me vulnerable. Both leave me vulnerable to attack and a lot of harm.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, when shame comes up, it's relational. And you can't have shame without some kind of context of some kind of relationship being in jeopardy, right? Like if I'm thinking I'm not good enough, how am I having relationships with people?
Yeah.
If I can have relationships with people, that means that I'm vulnerable. I'm not going to survive long. And so, yes, it's absolutely a fight or flight response. Brain just doesn't
know the difference.
And so the healing has to come from being in relationships.
Absolutely. I was, and in the work that I do and working and training youth care professionals who serve children and youth who are in foster care and experience trauma, I came across some research. You're probably familiar with Karen Purvis, and so she does the whole trust-based relationship intervention. But I love how in some of her work, in one of the articles I was reading, she says relationship-based trauma requires relationship-based healing. And it just keeps going back to this whole, none of us, right? Brene says it so lovely. And y'all know I'm a Brene fan because this is just, I really am. I want to be like her when I grow up. But she says, we are hardwired for connection. It is what gives meaning and purpose to life. And without it, there's always suffering. And so shame is a big part of that, right?
Yes.
And so when we talk about understanding our shame triggers, I want to hear your thoughts on this. But to me, it just reminds me of recognizing, even if you as a woman are listening to when you listen to the 12 areas, right? Recognizing when, is my trigger something to do with my appearance and body image? Is it something to do with my motherhood? Like recognizing what are the issues or the identities that are unwanted are probably really an indicator of that.
Well, I think probably in all those areas there are, I just can't imagine. I think if you're a mother, body image, I just don't know I have yet to meet a single female on this planet. And I have met them that are like 5'8" and a size 2.
Yeah.
And they will still sit in front of me and say, I need to lose weight. And I'm like, you don't get to play that card. No, absolutely not.
But for some reason,
they still believe.
Not beautiful
and so
enough.
I don't think, at least I don't see it this way, that we're saying, oh, it's only one of these areas.
No,
I think all these areas
and more.
There are messages that we have gotten that somehow we're not measuring up. With parenting, oh my goodness, how you discipline. Oh, you discipline that way? Oh, really?
Or how about if your child has a diagnosis and you attribute it to something wrong that I did, right? It must have been when I was pregnant. I ate the wrong thing. I didn't exercise enough. I didn't sleep enough. I got sick. So that must be why, and sometimes, honestly, I've had that thought, right? So I think my son had a hard labor. He got stuck. And because of the delivery process, sometimes I think, man, I wonder if that pressure on his spine and on his neck caused him to have some sensory issues, so you start going into this blame and like, it's my fault that I couldn't get him out enough because he was big, and all this other stuff. His shoulders were so broad. And you do kind of go down that thought of or let's say you have a child who has ADHD. We know there's a genetic link to that, but I think a lot of times as parents, I've heard them say, right? And I've worked with moms who have said, I did something wrong. My child is on the spectrum. Was it the immunizations I did? Was it something I ate? Was it something that I was exposed to in my environment that I didn't know about, right? And we start attacking ourselves, blaming ourselves, and feeling shame about our child's diagnosis. It may have nothing to do with you know what I mean? So if that's someone out there, I hope that you get free from that, that you will not blame yourself and shame and feel that that you did something, there's something wrong with you and your parenting and all that. So
all of them. Money and work. I kind of feel like in the United States, kind of the idea of success is you're working, at least 50, 60 hours a week, right? and you got to make a lot of money. You got to be making it rain, making it rain, making it rain. You know,
to be the identity, to be seen as successful,
yes, right? And if you're not doing that, lazy, deadbeat, poor work ethic. Oh, you're an artist. Oh, that just means you don't want to work.
You're starving.
Okay. And there's all these ideas, and it's like, well, okay, well maybe and it's like, no.
Yeah.
Be true to who you are.
Yeah.
Be true to who you are. I mean, seriously, you could go down the list and just name lots of different ways that, we feel shame. And it's universal. Yeah. So if you're out there and you're thinking, oh, I don't feel shame, yes, you do.
You're just probably not aware.
You may not be aware of it.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we don't. Because sometimes we just think, oh, I'm mad. And I didn't mention this, that sometimes when we are feeling shame, it does come up as being angry. And I always tell clients, anger always has a BFF. Always has a road dog, always. Anger does not show up alone.
Yeah.
And when anger shows up, that is your cue of, okay, what else am I feeling? Because I'm only feeling anger when I feel like there's something important to me that's being attacked or in danger.
Yeah.
And so, okay, I'm angry. I'm being motivated to do something. So why?
It almost, as I'm listening to you, and again, I could be totally wrong, but it sounds like anger is the outward manifestation of what I let people see. But the root or the core of that expression could be disappointment. It can be,
disappointment. It can be frustration. It can be shame,
of course,
guilt, sadness, betrayal. I mean, a whole list of things. And a lot of times we just stop at the anger. I was like, but there's a reason that I'm angry. I'm angry because you're doing something to me that I did not expect, and it's hurting my feelings. You've said something that is not true, and now I feel betrayed. I mean, there's a whole list of reasons why you're angry. And anger, it's a great way to keep yourself safe and protected. Because if I'm angry, I mean, most people aren't going to try and attack somebody who's angry, right? You're going to be like, whoa, you're going to back up from them. And so it's good for protection. And it's good motivating me to do something about what's under attack. But it doesn't really resolve anything if I just let it control me.
And if we don't really explore,
if we don't understand
what is really behind that.
Yes, because those other emotions, that is the thing, there's a need there, right? So if I think that my friend is being harmed in some way, and I'm angry and I'm going to do something about it, the need is I want my friend to be safe, right? And so I'm going to rise up until I achieve that need. And if I don't understand that my anger, it's not just anger, but it's a safety issue. It's a concern. It's a love. It's a shame. If I don't understand what the other emotion is, I can't meet the need.
That's true.
And then I'm stuck with my anger.
And that requires you to do some self-discovery and some self-exploration.
Yeah, it does.
Cool. So that is shame, resilience, element number 1. So the second one she talks about in her book is practicing critical awareness, which she kind of says is really just knowing why something exists, how it works, and how our society has impacted or is impacting that something, and that there's someone who's benefiting from it, right? I don't know if wanted to get your thoughts on what does it really mean to practice critical awareness?
Well, I mean, I think, recognizing that those expectations come from somewhere. I mean, as women of color, I mean, I can think historically, some of the expectations that we had, they were set in place by slavery. And they were in place for safety reasons, right? There was a purpose for them. But over time, you're still doing those things, and we're not in that context. And now it's just this heavy weight around our ankle. I mean, back in the day, if you were dark complected, okay, that means you're working out in the field. If you were lighter, that means you're a house slave, right? And there's privileges that came with that. You got education, you got to, and it kind of set up this division, this us versus them within the race, which you still see playing out. And that kind of shaming and, oh, well, you think that.
You think you're too good
and you
you're
blah, blah, blah.
And
not even realize that was so set in motion. And hello, it's a division, right? Because if I've got you fighting each other, I no longer have to be finding ways to destroy you because you're doing it against yourself. I can step back and just let you take each other out. And so, recognizing that those expectations come from somewhere, they're not just, made up. And even the ones that we set on ourselves.
Okay, so just to wrap up really briefly, when we talk about understanding our shame triggers, there's just a couple things I wanted to make sure were explicitly stated. Number one is we really just need to recognize the social situations where we're most likely to move away from, toward, or against others. So we need to be mindful of that. What social situations are causing us to do those, as she calls it, shame shields, right?
Yes.
Second would be we need to recognize the social expectations that are coming into conflict with our own personal expectations, right? So we need to be aware of, okay, where am I? What expectations do I have and what expectations do other people have? And am I okay with that?
Right.
And how do I navigate that? And then lastly is really recognizing which of these unwanted identities or areas of our lives are causing us to feel shame when they are criticized, right? So is it my mother? Is it my parenting? Is it me when it comes to work? Whatever those areas are that are under scrutiny or deemed wrong, unacceptable, damaged, bad, broken, not good enough, we need to recognize what those identities are. Okay. So the second resilience factor that Brene talks about is practicing critical awareness. And so she kind of breaks that down. I would love for you to expand on these, if you will, or expound on them. And I'm going to mention them, and then I want you to just kind of elaborate on them. So the first is, how do we practice critical awareness? Number one, we move from reinforcing shame to demystifying shame. The second is we move from individualizing shame to contextualizing shame. And then the third is moving from pathologizing shame to normalizing it. And so what I want to do is just have you share quickly on each one of those. So moving from reinforcing shame to demystifying shame. What the heck does that mean? Talk to us, Dr. Tracy.
What does that mean?
Talk to me, girl. Talk to me.
So basically, it really is becoming aware that, okay, I'm feeling this right now. And okay, so I'm feeling it. Now I've got to do something about it. I've got to do something with it. And I think Brene, she'll say, when you're feeling it, don't puff up. Don't shrink. So basically,
stand your sacred ground. She says.
She's like, don't start yelling and going all crazy and start throwing things and flashing red. But at the same time, don't withdraw and shrink and say I'm not going to say anything and feel really small. Just stand your ground. Just realize, I'm feeling this right now, and really just accept the fact that you are, in fact, experiencing shame. And I think the more you know what your triggers are. And what those expectations are, the easier it is to know, I'm feeling this right now.
Yeah. I love it. She said it in a way, it was just kind of like, I should be ashamed versus I'll share what I know.
Yeah.
You're right, to just kind of speak out against it, right? Okay, the second one is moving from individualizing shame, like I'm the only one, to contextualizing it, to I see the big picture. What exactly does that mean?
I kind of understand it to mean that, the whole idea behind shame is I'm the only one who has this feeling. I'm the only one who feels this way or thinks this way or is not measuring up in this way. And recognizing that other people have the same struggle. Today we recognize that both of us have this issue about our feet.
Right.
And that we're not alone.
Right.
And recognizing that, if I'm feeling it, there's somebody else out there that's feeling it too.
Yeah.
And in the same context. So it's not like that the way I'm experiencing it and in this way, it's only unique to me. That there are other people that have been in a similar situation with similar elements that are also feeling the same, kind of abandonment and isolation and rejection. And that it's, that.
I love that. I love what she said in the book. She said, shame only works if we think we're alone in it. And you mentioned that you are not alone, right? So it's not individualizing it. I'm the only one. I'm not alone, right? And so knowing that we're not alone in it helps us become more resilient. And then the third one is moving from pathologizing shame, something's wrong with me, versus normalizing it. I'm not the only one, right?
Yeah.
And I think that kind of reinforces the second one there. But is there anything else? I know I would love to hear your thoughts on the whole pathologizing shame, right? Something's wrong with me. What thoughts come to your mind on that?
And so a lot of times when I'm working with clients, I'll use the example of, let's say I have this beautiful clay bowl I have on the table. And my life is chaotic and crazy, and I'm cleaning one day and I'm dusting and I'm doing all this stuff, trying to get the house ready because, that's, we get caught up in that sometimes. And I actually bump the table that this bowl is on, and it crashes to the floor. Okay. And guilt would say, oh my goodness, I broke this. Oh man, I'm so distracted. I need to, help myself get more focused and, be aware. And I got to tell and clean up the pieces, and maybe we can still do something with it. Maybe we can glue it back together. Maybe there's something salvageable here. And shame would be, this is a mess. I can't do anything, and people are going to be mad, and I'm such a mess up, and I've ruined this, and I'm such a horrible person. I know how significant. Just so you just go on and on and on. I think when you start to go into that spiral and you stay just focused on what you're feeling and the disconnection, and it just kind of shame just kind of takes over. It's the only thing you can see. It's the only thing you can process, the only thing you can understand. And when I think about that woman who's broken the pottery, I think about a master potter. When they see those shards of brokenness on the ground, right, they're going to try and put those pieces back together. And there's actually Asian cultures who will break pottery on purpose and glue it back together because the cracks, they allow for light to go through it. They allow for different designs to show up in the pottery that is so unique and beautiful that you can't get from a perfectly created piece of work.
Yeah.
And then you have another group of potters that when something breaks, they will purposely just completely shatter and obliterate it. And they will use the dust from that pottery in the clay and make that new structure something even more unique and beautiful. And so I think when we're kind of stepping away from this, idea that, shame is and heavy and really get that we all experience it. We all break things. We all have broken areas, and we all have insecurities, but in the right hands, in the hands of a creator, the creator can make what we think is broken and can't be repaired and can't be fixed. Yeah. He can transform it into something beautiful and unique and has great purpose and great value. And for me, when I think of kind of taking away that pathology, it's like, I'm going to have these moments where I get caught up in my own thoughts and I get caught up in my own feelings, but let the potter take it. Let the creator take it and remind me that even in the brokenness, there is still value and beauty, that those pieces can be put together in some way and be purposeful. So
it's like that scripture that says he causes all things to work together for our good, right? Even the broken places, the broken pieces, it reminds me, I think it's the scripture where it says in Romans 9:20, who are you, a human being, to talk back to God? Shall what is formed say to the one who formed it, why did you make me like this? Because I think we can question, and that kind of goes to that pathologizing, doubting who we are, our value, our worth, and our beauty. And it's like, I made you.
Yes, I made you.
And I said you are fearfully.
Yes.
And wonderfully made. So I love that. Well, as we wrap up today's episode, I wanted to just ask you for your thoughts on, really what is the benefit? So we talked about practicing critical awareness and what that looks like, but really what is the benefit of practicing critical awareness? Why do you think that's so important to our shame resilience?
I think the more aware we are of, what our triggers are and, what situations cause us to puff up and get angry and say hurtful things and shame other people, and which ones cause us to pull away or people please, the more aware we are of that, the easier it is for us to step in and go, no, wait, there's a different way to handle this. And what I really need to do is just own my feeling and either talk it out with the person, process it with God, but somehow own that and rework it, right? Because if we don't, it'll destroy our relationships.
Absolutely.
I mean, it will absolutely destroy our relations. And that's what Satan wants. He wants us, a house divided can't stand. Right? And we need relationships. And that's all throughout Scripture. Ecclesiastes 4 says it very beautifully.
Yes.
So, we need friends, we need people. And in order to maintain those relationships, we absolutely have to know when we feel shame and own it and work to transform it. Don't let it own us.
I love that. Awareness is key because you can't change or confront what you're not aware of, you know. And so as we end today, I'm going to use her words that Brene says, we are not going to shrink back. We're not going to puff up. We're going to stand our sacred ground. And I think the sacred ground for us is God's word and what he says about who we are, right?
Yes.
So,
Amen.
Girl, thank you so much for coming back and just being with us today and sharing all your thoughts on shame resilience. And so I hope that today's episode encouraged you. We're going to come back for part 2 and talk about the 2 other elements of shame resilience. So I hope that you will share this. I hope that you will like it. I hope that you will give me your comments, and maybe next time you have questions for Dr. Tracy that maybe we didn't explore today, and I would love to hear that from you. So be sure to reach out to me online, on social media, with your questions that you may have on this topic. And maybe you want to share your story, some of your experience of shame, and maybe how you practice shame resilience. We will love to hear from you. Hey, thanks so much for joining me for this particular episode. I hope you feel encouraged, equipped, and empowered to celebrate who God has uniquely designed, gifted, and purposed you to be, so that you can go on out there and with full confidence fulfill your God-given destiny. Listen, if you enjoyed this message, could you please do me a favor and take a minute to just do 3 things for me? Would you, number 1, subscribe to this show, y'all? Show me some love. Number 2, would you give me a 5-star rating and review on iTunes? That's going to help boost my ratings and get more people aware of what I'm doing. And number 3, can you just share this episode on your social media or send to a friend? You know, when we find good things, good content, y'all, don't we want to share it? So I just hope that I'm one of those people out there that you are finding great content and encouragement and support and resources from, and that you will be able to share that out with your network. And so by doing those 3 simple things, others are going to be able to receive the same encouragement and resources and strategies to increase their hope, strengthen their faith, and boost their psychological well-being. So thanks for being my number 1 supporter, because you know what? I really couldn't do this without you. Once again, thanks so much for listening, and talk to you next time. Peace.